Welcome to the Changemakers Compass, your guide to cultivating influence and making an impact as a human-hearted leader. My name is Darren Steele. I'm your host and a coach for changemakers, leaders, and social entrepreneurs. Now, on the podcast, I empower aspiring and established leaders to take a stand for what's right and support a common humanity of dignity and equity and share their unique wisdom with those who need it most. So I invite you to join me for a thought-provoking conversation, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories designed to help you embrace your role as a leader, define your core message, and lead with clarity, compassion, and purpose. So today's show is like, wow, let's take a very slow, deep breath and let it go. Because it's Monday, January 20th, 2025, and the incoming leader in the United States is incoming. So much for eloquence at the beginning of my show. It is a very difficult day for a lot of people. It's a day of celebration for a lot of other people. But even here in Canada, where I live, people that I follow, people that I'm speaking with, we're concerned, we're worried, some people are afraid, some people are losing hope. And I want to talk to that challenge in this episode. So it's going to be a very personal, bit of a freewheeling. I have my show notes with me. And I hope that I can offer you some insights and some guidance and some different ways of thinking and reframing what's happening right now. So I'm calling today's show How to Be Well and Excel as a Change Maker for Our Common Humanity in 2025. I'm going to speak about the importance of prioritizing your self-care and what my acronym CARE means for both reasoning and to support and safeguard your compassion and equanimity. The big challenge many of us are facing right now is what to do about social media. If you're really astute, you're thinking, really? That's the big problem? What about this incoming administration and politics and polarization and oligarchy? Yes. But here's the thing. Most of us are communicating through social media channels. That is the dominant form of communication right now, other than face-to-face meetings if you're working in an organization or other individuals on Zoom or in person. Now, there have been some substantial changes, in particular with Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram and Threads. So it was about 2 weeks ago now that Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced policy changes that would eliminate fact checkers, the staff that do fact checking on Facebook and Instagram, and reduce restrictions on the posts, the kinds of posts, the kind of language that users could share. And this in particular includes loosening restrictions. And loosening restrictions is an interesting turn of phrase, if ever there were one, on contentious topics like immigration and gender. So basically, there have been examples cited of basically people can say whatever the fuck they want about immigrants and gender and trans people and LGBTQ people. That's just an open pathway to outright prejudice and racism and hatred. There is an interesting article, and anything I'm referring to in the podcast, I'm going to make sure I have links in the show notes. There was an interesting article on Substack in the Persuasion publication about why it might be a good thing that fact checkers are being eliminated on Facebook and Instagram. I'm not sure how I feel about the article in the whole, but what they talked about was how crowdsourcing fact checking, meaning instead of having someone employed at Meta that's fact checking, because there's human error, but there's also the guidelines within the organization at Meta, at Facebook, that may be too strict, maybe too loose, maybe right, or maybe wrong. But crowdsourcing, meaning if you then go on Facebook and there's no paid for fact checking provided by the organization, people can rise up and say, no, what's being published here is wrong. And in the comments and in other posts, they might seek to openly document and link out to the information that disproves the falsehood. So that in and of itself is a very good thing, because that kind of creates a community engagement, activism, and paying attention to what is going on social media, or what is going on social media. But it's very clearly a situation of these huge companies, and in this case, we're talking just about Meta, bowing down to the Trump administration. Completely ridiculous idea that they are making things easier for free speech. There's really not been that much of a problem with free speech. The problem that the incoming oligarchs have is being held accountable to their free speech. We have a free speech society pretty much in North America. Other countries are quite different. Russia is an example of lawyers defending the sadly now deceased Navalny. I don't think I'm saying his name correctly. The lawyers were seized and put in prison for 3 years for simply defending their client, which meant they had to speak about it in public. That's not free speech. Absolutely not free speech. That is controlled speech, what can be said and what cannot be said. But for now, at least, we still have free speech in the sense that you can say what you want to say without being imprisoned. And let's hope that it stays that way. Because if we don't have that, we don't have a possibility of having any kind of healthy debate on these quote-unquote contentious issues. And I say quote-unquote because I don't think common humanity or dignity or equity or equality in the sense of all of us having civic freedoms and rights, I don't think that should be contentious. But I also don't think that one side should prioritize another side's ignorance and try and make people feel bad. And perhaps shaming and making people feel guilty, but shaming is the worst of the two, has factored a lot into part of where we are now. So the dilemma is, should I stay or should I go now, to quote The Clash? I'm staying on social media for now for a couple different reasons. One, this is where I'm hoping to build my business and share my message for other thoughtful, human-hearted leaders who want to take a stand for what they know is right and who can inspire others who need their guidance and their wisdom. This is our marketplace. This is right now in the world. Social media is our marketplace, and until there's a better way of doing this, we have become so conditioned to going online, to connecting with friends, to watching funny things, to switching over to Netflix or whatever and watching a movie and then coming back and reading the latest news. This is the place where a lot of us connect for so many different reasons. Now, I referenced self-care, which I'm going to come to in a moment or two, and the importance of how that affects your leadership and being able to be the change and affect transformational change. If your self-care is suffering so much so because of being on social media or being on a particular platform like perhaps Meta, then by all means take care of yourself and leave the platform. Perhaps do a 30-day detox, temporarily deactivate your account, or let it go. There are other ways you can remain in the conversation without having to be on social media. You can be still a supporter of other advocates who are online and are standing up and have the greater capacity or the inner strength or the leadership ability to do that. And by you supporting those people, you will be amplifying their voices nonetheless. Even if your voice can't be heard directly, indirect voices right now are probably more important than ever. And I just had an insight here by saying that indirect voices that are encouraging the leaders to stand up for what they believe is right, supporting those that have the capacity and the skill to be the change, to speak to the other side that is so against or doesn't want to hear. The greater the capacity for eloquence, not in the sense of being elevated and speaking above or not making sense to other people, but eloquence in the sense of succinctly, simply being understood and imparting a message of acceptance and understanding and building bridges. This is what we need right now for making people feel safe, for creating more respect, and for also advocating for cultivating and empowering the kind of changes that need to come into place to reduce the oncoming harms that have been promised by the incoming legislation and government coming into the United States today. Yeah, I'm addicted to my coffee today. If you're listening to this, I'm just finishing my espresso because it's the thing that feels like it's keeping me on. So if the behavior online or wherever you show up to try and be a change leader is too toxic, support those who in this moment feel they have a greater ability to take this on. But if you are a leader who is ready to engage and show up and wants to take responsibility for yourself and for a cause that you believe is important, I encourage you to look inward. Make sure your values support you. What are your core values? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? Why do you believe those values or those beliefs are true? How do you use that certainty, that knowledge to then go forward for what you believe is right and to inspire others to follow your lead? How do you remain open to new information that may improve or even challenge what you believe to be true? How does that affect your capacity for compassionate leadership and equanimity in the face of heated argument and polarization or direct challenges to what you're saying you believe is true or is the right thing to do? As a human-hearted leader who wants to stand up for our common humanity, people will be looking to you as a model or as a mirror for themselves. We can't perfectly model, we can't perfectly copy what other people do because we have to find our own authentic, free expression to show up as our best selves. But think for yourself, how am I demonstrating, or when I say, how am I modeling dignity? If I ask myself, Darren, how are you modeling dignity, respect, and truth in a chaotic digital space like a Facebook or an Instagram when I show up and publish something? Meaning a model walks down the runway or just stands and puts on clothes and says, how do you think these clothes fit my body and my whole facial expression and my posture? How do you think these things show off what I'm wearing that I'm presenting to you, the audience, the onlooker? When I take on the cloak of dignity, when I put on the tie of respect, when I pull up my pants of truth, when I tighten my belt of acceptance, I am modeling what I believe those values to be for others to see and to judge me on, because we are all going to be critical, and critical doesn't have to be a bad thing, but critical in the sense of if we are really critically observing someone else's modeling behavior and their characteristics as a human-hearted leader, we want to know, is this someone I trust? Is this someone who inspires trust in me? Is this someone who inspires me to take on the same belt of understanding, to put on the same tie of respect? And I can't remember now what the other two pieces of clothing were, to show up in the same way. Because leadership is about community. Leadership is about communing, which means coming together and seeing you, recognizing you, and seeing myself in you and reflecting that back so that you see yourself in me. Leadership in its truest sense is not about me telling you what to do. It's not about me standing out in front of you saying, hey, great, thanks for following along. Leadership is walking alongside or supporting from behind and allowing someone to take their place ahead of me, to show them off for what it is they're modeling, the characteristics, the change that they want to see in the world. So instead of going at length about self-care, I want to just mention that about 2 weeks ago, the post I published about self-care and why it's the key to inspire leadership and making meaningful change is my acronym for self-care, CARE, is caring, attention, recognition, and enthusiasm. If you're not taking active and conscientious care for your well-being, your physical body, your mental state, whatever it is you do, yoga, workout, walks, rest, having enjoyment with friends and family, meditation, you won't be able to think clearly, rationally, reasonably. You won't have the energy to show up and be a leader. If you don't have a clear attention on what it is you want to do, or rather, if you don't have the right attention. So, for example, if you're not feeling good about things, your attention might be on the what you're not feeling good about, as opposed to what it is you can do to make a difference. Recognition is what I just said a few moments ago. Seeing that other person, seeing you and the other person, seeing our common humanity, seeing the other person, seeing other people as equally deserving of respect and understanding and of acceptance. You do not have to agree with them. You do not have to like them for their views. You do not have to communicate with them if they're taking it to a level that becomes too uncomfortable or too impossible. And finally, enthusiasm. Man, I did not feel the enthusiasm and joy this morning because I was reading news. I was getting very upset. I was getting very frustrated. And I asked myself, what can I do to raise my level of enthusiasm as part of my self-care? And I thought, I had a plan for what it is I was going to talk about in my content calendar for what it is that I wanted to produce today. The basic idea was I wanted to talk about, wouldn't it be great if people thought critically, humanely, and with compassion all at the same time? And now here we are. That kind of gave me the inspiration to lighten up a little bit and think, I need to do a podcast instead of writing because I don't know how long it would take me to write this. I don't know if I could impart my characteristic tone, my personal essence and energy into the words alone without being able to speak to the camera and have you hear my voice and see my gestures and see my facial expressions today. Because I know when I see myself in the camera today, I feel that I look pained. And I am. But I know this is more than enough reason to keep going and doing what I do because I know I'm not the only one. And I know there are many individuals that have much more to be concerned about for their own personal safety and well-being than I do, which doesn't make them any better than me. But it's just recognizing the challenges that different individuals have. I want to just end with a little bit of hope. Robert Reich, who writes prolifically on Substack and often in The Guardian and talks about American politics, wrote this morning that so many people he knows, including, I suspect, many of you, are despairing over Trump's second regime, which starts today. I share your fears about what's to come, yet I remain hopeful about the future of America, and here's why. And he goes on, it's a very short post, but talks about the fact that, in a nutshell, this is what I would say. These are my words, not his. Sometimes things really do have to get much worse before they get better. We have seen for a long time what has been happening to democracy in the United States. As a Canadian, we see what's happening in our political landscape that has been influenced by things that are happening all over the world as well as the United States. As a queer person, as a gay man, as part of the LGBT community, I see how many of my friends and colleagues are deeply worried and afraid for their lives. And I'm not being, what's the word I'm looking for? It is a serious statement, for their lives. There have been more physical attacks of trans people on the ground. There has been a spike in suicides of trans individuals shortly after Donald Trump won the election. People are that afraid to continue going on. And if you are someone who can take a stand right now for what you know is right and for what you support, please don't back down. But don't do it alone. Because remember, like I said, leadership is about community. Leadership is a human-hearted endeavor to make a difference in the world. And doing it alone takes you outside of the community that is suffering takes you outside of the communities that can empower you and themselves to be the change for a better humanity that is respectful of dignity and equity and freedom. So let me end with an ask, a call to action. Social networks are not friendly to many of us right now. The algorithm, the changes to regulations are going to prioritize what triggers you and what's trending long before you get to see what you want to see that your friends are writing or saying, and long before my content gets out there, which you could easily miss if what I'm saying is relevant and of importance to you. Your email address is kind of sacred right now. It is the most effective way for you to stay in contact with me, for you to make sure you can get my latest articles and ideas and podcasts about human-hearted leadership. So I'm asking you, inviting you to subscribe to my newsletter at darrensteele.com. I will have the show notes there, but you get on my homepage. It's right there at the top of the page. Enter your email address, and you're going to get meaningful insights and guidance delivered to you pretty much every week so that you can cultivate dignity and equity as an ethical change maker and a compassionate leader determined to make a transformational difference in the world for our common humanity. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and be well.